Tank Davis is a master of seeing his opponent's punches and countering, and he does it by being a proactive counterpuncher. Most fighters believe that counterpunching is a skill built on timing and reflexes, but effective and reliable counterpunching needs more than that. The best counterpunchers in history are proactive counterpunchers. This means that they create their own openings before they counter. This approach to counterpunching makes it easier to land our punches because we control when and where the opening is happening. On the other hand, only relying on your timing and reflexes will leave you limited to a few moments through the fight. That may give you some success, but we will be forced to wait for our opponent's mistakes to react and counter, and we will lose our own opportunities to counter when they adjust. This video will teach you how to become a proactive counterpuncher, so you can create your own opportunities to attack. We will first define what makes a proactive counterpuncher, and then we will compare it with a passive counterpuncher. This way you will know the difference. After this, we will apply this concept step by step into a fight, using Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia as an example. Let's start by defining what proactive counterpunching is. Let's watch some examples and tell me, what do all these sequences have in common? First sequence, just keep your eyes on Marquez. Now in this sequence, what is Pacquiao doing before the big shot? In this last one, notice what is Maidana doing before he counters. Can you see what all of these have in common? In all of these sequences, the counterpuncher initiates the exchange and counters once their opponent opens up. This is proactive counterpunching, when a fighter uses a setup to make their opponents open up and then they counter based on the reaction. This is why they know when the punch is coming and they are prepared to react. This method of counterpunching gives you control over the fight and makes your counters more reliable. But now you might be wondering, isn't counterpunching just seeing a punch coming, defending it, and countering it? That, in order to counterpunch, we must let our opponent to do the first move, and then we react and counter them. Well, that is called passive counterpunching, where we passively wait for our opponent to do the first move before we get to act. This approach to counterpunching happens in two steps. The first step, our opponent throws a punch. Second step, we defend and counter. This is the most spread out approach to countering, and if you have trained counterpunching, I'm pretty sure you have used this framework. This approach is technically correct, but it's not the full picture. Just using this two-step approach will limit your counterpunching opportunities because we give control to our opponent of when the exchange will start. Since we depend on them to do the first move, as soon as they adjust their tactics, we're going to lose our opportunities to counter. For example, in Inoue versus Nery, we saw Inoue getting countered. It came down to Inoue standing too long in the mid-range, and Nery countered him. Once Inoue adjusted, we didn't see the counter land again. Nery had no tools to keep Inoue in the mid-range. Without trading in the mid-range, Nery couldn't land his left cleanly again. And even by the end of the fight, Inoue started to use Nery's punch against him. He used the mid-range to bait the shot and counter with his own shots. The counter that Nery used in itself was just fine, but he didn't have the tools to put Inoue in the right position to land that shot again. Inoue was the one in control of the fight. Nery could have the best timing in the world, but if he's forced to fight in Inoue's terms, he won't be able to time the opening he wants to use. This is why the two-step approach is not the full picture, because we give control of the exchange to our opponent. But we want to be the ones in control. We want to be the ones provoking their mistakes. In this other example, we see Ngannou countering Fury with a left hook. And this shot is something that Ngannou came prepared to throw on top of Fury's cross. It is a shot that he threw from the first round. And just took him a few tries before he got the timing right and scored the knockdown. But after it landed, what happened? Why we never saw that left hook play a role on the fight again? Fury controlled the exchanges. He made sure to be in positions where he was moving away from the hook or to be in positions where he was able to defend it. Fury jabbed while lifting his rear arm to anticipate the hook. I noticed that he was moving towards the left. This moves him away from the shot. Fury feints before his jabs. Then he pulls anticipating the hook and jabs again. When Ngannou initiates another attack, he raises his left arm to block the right hand and clinches to stop the action. Remember when I mentioned that Ngannou was prepared to counter Fury's right hand with his left hook? Well, now Fury became more selective when he would throw his right hand and use it to counter instead. Using the right hand as a counter made it harder for Ngannou to counter the right hand. After this example, I think my point is pretty clear. Without controlling the exchanges, timing and reflexes are not enough to win a fight. If you can't control when you're going to exchange, you won't be able to control when you are going to counter. Ngannou was certain that he had an opening to take when Fury threw his cross. Nery was also aware of what was his best punch against Inoue. They both knew what punch they wanted to land, and they also had the timing to land it. But the only thing on their way was their ability to control the exchanges. This is why passive counterpunching is not the full picture. We can't rely on our opponent to give us the opportunities to counter. We must create our own opportunities. Now, at this point, I have a huge disclaimer to make. I am not saying that countering only with your timing and reflexes is wrong. These kind of counters are great, and the more experienced you are, the more often you will pull them off. What I am saying is that training only to time your opponents is not an approach that will develop you as a fighter in the long run, because it is a passive mindset, and we want to be the ones in control through the whole fight, no matter if we attack, defend, or counter. Timing and reflexes are really useful, and they work great for sure. But without controlling the exchanges, we won't be able to counter consistently. Now, you might be wondering, what is the full picture? What is the right approach to counterpunching? The right framework uses 3 steps, and it just needs a change of mindset. The first step is to control the exchanges, so we can control the pacing of the fight and pick the right moment for us to counter. Then, we find the setup that makes our opponent react and open up. And then, we use our timing and reflexes to defend the shot and counter. This is exactly the framework that Tank used to counter Garcia's left hook. Before I continue, if you have watched up to this point and you feel like this video has been valuable, please give the channel a follow. It will help me to keep bringing content like this for you. Now, let's break down how Tank used the 3-step framework through the fight. The first step is to control the exchanges, and this means that you control when the exchanges start and when they finish. Tank controlled the exchanges by first negating them. He used distance to stay well outside of Garcia's punching range. He used his lead hand to fill the space between them, and used his footwork to move and adjust when he felt like he was in danger. Notice how Garcia is barely in punching range. Tank also created a sense of danger. He punched every time he could when Ryan stepped in too close. He feinted and changed levels to keep him on his toes. He did all this to keep Garcia uncomfortable, forcing him to think twice before he attacked. Lastly, when everything failed, he would smother. This will help Tank to stop the exchanges when they were not going his way. With the control of the exchanges and slowing down the fight, now Tank could focus on finding a setup that worked. And setups are divided in 2 kinds, feints and baits. Feints is the one where we attack or create an illusion of an attack, so our opponent opens up. This is the kind of setup I have been showing through the video. The second kind of setups are baits. In this one, we give a target for our opponent to hit. When they take the bait, we spring the trap and counter. Mayweather's pull counter is one of the most recognizable baits. Tank's setup was his stretch lead hand. Initially, was just used to fill the gap between him and Ryan. But Ryan started to use the stretch arm as an opening. But an opening is only an opening if you are not aware of it. And because Tank was aware of this opening, he will constantly move and adjust to make sure he could see Ryan's hook coming. This setup is what Tank used through the whole fight to force Ryan into exchanges. Even if Ryan changed his reactions, he was still reacting to Tank's setup. Ryan tried to jab instead of hooking, but Tank was ready to counter. What if he threw a right hand? Tank was ready to counter. What if he did nothing? Tank was ready to initiate an attack. The point here is that Ryan was always reacting to Tank's setup, and this means that Tank was always in control of the exchange. Once we find a setup that makes them react, all we have to do is to react and counter. Even if he was controlling the exchanges and had a good setup, it still took a few tries before Tank got the timing of the hook down. Once Tank found his mark, Ryan's hook stopped to be a concern in the fight. The last thing to remember is that even with the right framework, it still takes a few tries before you can get the timing down to land clean. If it took Tank several tries to land the shot with control of the exchanges, imagine how long it could have taken him to do that without controlling exchanges or setups. This is why controlling the exchanges is the first and most important step of this framework. Once you control the exchanges, it is easier to find your setup, see the punches coming, and land your counters. One of the most important things to control exchanges is to have a solid stance that allows you to move and defend your opponent's punches. If you are interested to learn more about that, click on this video, where I explain how to improve your stance and your high guard. If this video was useful, please give a follow to support the channel, and share this video with a gym partner who might need it. Thanks for watching.